A new climate change con job. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And you thought there couldn't come any more climate change con jobs, as President Donald Trump calls the movement, right? Well, think again, because as soon as one dies, as soon as one gloom and doom theory gets shown to be based on deception and lies, another one pops up, right? That's the thing with the left. You got to give them credit. They never quit. They're like the energizer bunnies of the demonic world. They just never quit with their anti-freedom, anti-American, anti-humanity provisions and agendas. They just keep on going, right? As soon as one gets shown to be based on false doctrine, they just pick up and move on with the next. And you know why they can get by with that so easy peasy, right? They get by with it so easy peasy because by and large, the media are on their side. Many members of the media lean left, even though they claim to be independent. But if you look past that independent tag into what they actually believe, as Pew Research Center has done over the years, you find that 85% of journalists in America's newsrooms lean left, right? They say that they're independent thinking, independent minded, independent voting. But the things they believe in, all far left, Marxist, communist, collectivist ideas, abortion on demand, even after the birth of the baby. They don't call that murder, they call that abortion. They believe in DEI, they believe in wokeism, they believe in all things transgender based on their so-called visions of science. They say that a boy can indeed become a girl simply by undergoing a couple medical procedures and downing a couple of pills, and voila, you have a new sex out there. They say that individuals don't have to identify as he or she, that's just too limiting. It's discriminatory. Just call yourself a they or a whatever, and then demand that other people recognize that as sane and go along with your deception as well. These are things that the left believe, right? And nowhere do the left's lies become so apparent, so outed over the years as with climate change, because they come out and they make these pronouncements. 12 years to the entire earth is destroyed. 12 years. And then all you have to do is wait a couple years, right? And guess what? The 12 years doomsday clock never changes. I remember when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she put on her Greta Thunberg intellect, right? And started going around saying that the UN IPCC, right, the Intergovernmental, or whatever that I stands for, Intergovernmental, I think, Panel on Climate Change, came out with a report that said the world would explode. And by explode, I mean explode, right? In 12 years, if humans didn't stop developing and breathing even. So we only had 12 years to come up with a new method of breathing, a new type of air, right? And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ran around and cried about 12 years, and she had the solution, right? This little barmaid from the Bronx had this solution to save the world, and it was called the Green New Deal, or was it the New Green Deal? I can never remember, but either way, it was a Green Deal, and in it came the solution to that 12-year doomsday clock. And guess what? We waited a couple years because that new Green Deal or Green New Deal just couldn't get passed through Congress. And so what she had to do was somehow continue to press the dire need for the passage of this new Green New Deal, else the world would explode in 12 years. But she had to do it in a way that we didn't notice that 12 years had actually turned into 11 years, turned into 10 years, turned into 9 years, and so forth and so on. but we were still here. So you would think she would have started reducing her numbers and saying things like 11 years or 10 years. But no, she didn't do that. She kept up the 12 years even when we had moved past the 12-year mark. She still kept shrieking about 12 years. And then when it just became too ridiculous even for her, apparently, to uphold that lie, she just conveniently forgot about 12 years and moved on to something else, right? Moved on to something else just as stupid and just as false and deceptive. So this is how the whole climate change movement goes. And before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, because I don't want to get carried away and forget to mention. So I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, that is RLN. Go there. Check out all the podcasts and all the video blogs that they put forth on a daily basis, right? RLN is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's, here we go again, I'm going to try and say this tongue twister, Calvary Chapel Chino Hills Church in California. I mean, geez, Peter Piper picked a peck, right? That's so child's play compared to Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. Anyhow, it's a faith-based news outreach arm of his church in California, and great stuff there. Great stuff. Bold and Blunt has been part of that lineup for a while now. You can go there, check it out. You may also subscribe to Bold and Blunt through WashingtonTimes.com. Just find the newsletter section. There's a link on the bottom of the webpage there. Click on it and find Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. That's my newsletter. If you enter your email address, you'll get delivered right to your email box my Bold and Blunt podcasts, as well as all the commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, giving you the tools you need to fight the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of this world, which shouldn't be hard, right? Because we're talking about an IQ level of, negative something. But you know what? The fact is, you still need facts to fight even the negative IQs that mark many on the left. So if you want those bullet points, sign up for my newsletter and you'll get them delivered to you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right to your email box. And guess what? Yep. Should I give you a minute to guess? Or no, I'm just going to spill the secret right now. I'm doing a lot more video, right? Video, Bold and Blunt. I've got one coming out Friday. I've got one coming out next Friday. Guess what? I see a trend here. I think every Friday I might be doing a little video, Bold and Blunt. And you're not going to want to miss those. So sign up, subscribe. What have you got to lose? Nothing, right? Nothing. Everything to gain, nothing to lose. That's called win-win. But you can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. So let's get back to climate change and the lies that mark the climate change agenda and movement and campaign, and just the never-ending lies. Look, the whole thing starts with a lie, right? Let's just look at this common sense. Let's take away the you're not a scientist, you're not a meteorologist, you don't have a PhD arguments, and just go right for the common sense, because that's what this world so desperately needs, more common sense. Look at the idea of predicting the weather, right? Look at your local newscasters, your local weathermen, weatherwomen. I don't know what the politically correct term is these days, but look at your weather newscasts and notice that what they say is going to happen for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday rarely happens, okay? So that's all climate prediction. So looking at the clouds and reading the atmospheric pressures, barometers, whatever it is that is used as meteorological. Is that the way to say it? Whatever tools they use to predict the weather are not 100% accurate, okay? I mean, some are better than others. And even the best, though, aren't 100%. So that's common sense point number one. If you can't predict what the weather is going to be on a day-to-day basis, and you can't predict it out for the full week, never mind the month, then what what says the predictions that the climate change alarmists give for, say, 12 years are any more accurate than what your local weather person gives you on the evening news? All right, that's common sense point number one. Common sense point number two, how they arrive at these predictions. All the weather people, all the climate change people, all the climate change alarmists out there, how they arrive at their predictions is using computer modeling, right? What they do is they input certain facts and figures into a computer database, and then the computer database goes through its little computing and then spits out what is most likely to occur over the course of time if the inputted facts and figures and factors hold true. So those computer models, those computer predictions are only as accurate as the numbers that are inputted. And the problem with that is that rarely are the numbers that are inputted, as I said before, I'm not sure on that word, we can look that up later, but the numbers that are put into the system, of course they change over time. How could they not change over time? Because remember, go back to common sense point number one, weather people can't even predict with 100% accuracy the full week's weather report. So how can they possibly know all the numbers that have to go in to predict out, again, let's just use 12 years, because that's what the climate change alarmists have settled upon for the gloom and doom and the destruction of the world. How can they possibly predict out 12 years? Look, just common sense. Common sense. Those are two common sense bullet points. And here's the third. Here's the third, which for bold and blunt listeners, surely you have to appreciate this, because remember, this is coming at you from a Christian conservative perspective. Isn't God in charge of the weather? I mean, no matter what humans do, we can build here, we can pave there, we can burn this and not burn that. We can drive here and fly there. And all these things certainly do have some sort of impact on the environment, on the weather patterns, on maybe even the temperatures. But don't you think, again, common sense, Christian, don't you think God knows this and accounted for that? When he created the earth and he created the seasons and he created the stars and the sun, which, yes, I know the sun technically is a star. When he created everything, don't you think that he knew what was going to happen when humans populated the earth, based on his commandment, by the way, go forth and multiply, and started developing things and creating things? Don't you think he knew that? And don't you think that it's God who is in control of the end times? So if the earth is going to explode, don't you think it would be God who makes that happen, not the fact that you're driving 50 miles each day to and from work? Not the fact that you're not offsetting your carbon footprint by contributing, $16 a day to the Al Gore Climate Change Fund. Just because you're not sending money into PETA to save the polar bears, then that doesn't mean that the earth is going to be destroyed any sooner than how God has already ordained it. That's not to say that smart environmentalism is not a good thing to do. I'm in favor of recycling, if that's your thing. I don't do it, but I'm in favor of it. If that's what you want to do. I'm really in favor of ingenuity, coming up with ways to repurpose things that otherwise would have been thrown to the side or otherwise thrown onto the landfill. I think that's great. And I think the scientific minded and the ingenious creatives out there who can come up with ways to recycle trash or reuse and repurpose sources and resources of the land. That's all well and good. That's all great. And even alternative energy. If windmills worked, if solar panels really were great for saving people money and heating and cooling their homes in a cost-efficient manner, in a way that saved the environment, all well and good. But these things don't really take place unless they are heavily subsidized. And even then, the outcomes are hardly what was promised. The outcomes of using these alternative energy sources, they're hardly cost efficient, and they hardly yield what is expected or promised. But that being said, let's continue to research. Let's continue to forge new ways to heat and cool and drive and fly and all that. That's all good. Just not using taxpayer dollars, right? I don't like tax dollars being used for it, because that just seems like it benefits businesses instead of the citizens who are paying for these businesses to really have risk-free ways of going forth with their ingenious plans that may or may not succeed. So if they fail using tax dollars, if businesses fail using tax dollars, where's the consequence to the business? It's the consequence to the taxpayer, to me and to you. That all being said, though, climate change, alarmism, the whole carbon offset program, all that environmentalism that we've been chastised and scolded and just browbeat into pretending like we care about and that is a real thing for so many years. Such a lie, such a deception, and such a pocket enrichment for the leftists who love to sell and hype the fear of climate change because it's so profitable to them. And look, I have a guest with me today who is here to highlight a new danger in the climate change alarmism movement, and it's one that will shut down your free speech. So, in other words, if they can't push the lie, then their next step is to stop you from talking about the lie. Wow, what a neat trick this is, right? Bill Walton, host of the Bill Walton Show, a podcast that is a great listen. If you haven't listened in, you got to tune in, because he's dubbed the Common Sense CEO. He has years and years of business and political experience, but he's the Common Sense CEO, and isn't that what we need more of? He's a repeat guest, and I'm so happy to have him back today. Bill Walton, thank you so much for coming back on Bold and Blunt. It is great to have you here.
Oh, it's fun talking with you, and it's you know a lot, which makes it even more interesting.
Oh, well, thank you.
I gotta be on top of my game when I'm talking with you.
Oh, gosh, no, you're going to be educating everybody on this topic today, myself included, and that's why I'm so excited to dive into it. You have stumbled upon, I guess to put it that way, the fact that COP30 is pushing this, what they're calling a Declaration on Information Integrity on Climate Change. What is that?
Well, I'll give you the short answer is, if you can't win the argument, you try to shut the other side up.
Right.
And what's happening at COP, which is Conference of the Parties, and is notorious for giving us things like the Paris Accord. This is 30 stands for 30 years, and this has been going on for a long time. And the latest is down in Belém, Brazil. The headline issue from our side is just what they've done. I think there are like 12 countries have signed an agreement that they will take every step as governments to cause social media companies and other media companies to censor what they call misinformation, disinformation, I think malinformation. They've got all sorts of categories of things they think ought to not be explained to people. And of course, what misinformation is very often is the truth. And we saw this, in the Biden administration, the CISA, which was the agency that was working with all the social media companies to block people talking about lockdowns, vaccines, etc. This is the same playbook, and this time they want to do it to advance the climate agenda. And it's a real sign of weakness, actually, because they've been at this for 30 years, and the tone of the conference this year is really one of desperation. They don't really know quite where to take it from here, because all the gloomy predictions have not come true. And the kind of things that they're getting a lot of pushback from from developing countries who want to use modern technologies to fuel their economies and not stay in the ancient past with burning wood for heat. I mean, I could go on and on. It's they're also using the indigenous people down there. This conference it's at the edge of the rainforest in Brazil, and rainforest we know is essential to processing carbon dioxide and endangered species and all sorts of species. And so what they did to make this conference hospitable to the delegates is they chopped down big chunks of the rainforest to build a super highway for the delegates.
Only a leftist.
Yeah. So the funny thing is they don't have enough rooms down there. They don't have enough beds for the delegates. And so they brought in yachts to sit offshore so people can stay on yachts while they attend this conference.
And
it
look,
gives you a flavor for who these people are.
So Germany, France, Canada, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, all among those 12 nations that signed on to this free speech nightmare. America, of course, hasn't. But here's the thing that worries me, Bill, and that should worry everybody listening to this. Save for the Donald Trump administration, we would join this, right? If there were a Democrat, if Harris had won, we would be jumping aboard this same agreement, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. I mean, this was at the top of the Biden administration's agenda, and we were driving a lot of this, and we were driving it domestically. Remember, Biden had two whole of government initiatives. One was DEI, and the other one was climate. And, Janet Yellen at Treasury had climate at the top of her list of what Treasury should be focused on, which is, from somebody from a money background like me, is insane. But that's nevertheless what we've got. And so we've got Donald Trump, who's called it a con game, and he's right. And we have not even sent one official delegate to the conference. And in past years, the United States has been by far the biggest delegation. We're standing there stopping this with the Trump administration, but we've got to be mighty sure that we win the next presidential election so we can really, put this thing away. And in our absence, guess who's got the largest I don't know what they've called it, the pavilion at the conference, right next to the entrance where everybody can see who they are, is China.
Oh, jeez.
As I said, the ironies don't stop.
Yeah.
China's building 2 coal plants every week.
And India's right next to them, right?
Exactly. and of course China, that's the interesting thing about the signatories to these countries that want to shut down speech is that their economies are getting really clobbered by this moving to wind and solar. And Germany shut down all its nuclear plants, and Germany's seeing its manufacturing base erode. And they used to be the manufacturing capital of the world before China showed up on the scene. And all the European economies have suffered because of the climate edicts from Brussels, and so they're signing away their future of all the people that live in their countries, and they just don't care.
So you mentioned how the previous administration pushed climate change even through, Janet Yellen's Treasury. But one of Joe Biden's first executive orders was to mandate that all the agencies, all the cabinet heads come up with ways to combat climate change in all their agencies. So it was definitely a number one priority with that Democrat administration. And that's what we'd be looking at once again if another Democrat enters the White House.
That's something we've got to stop at all costs. I mean, that's what they call their whole of government approach.
Yeah.
You look at what they were working on. I mean, even the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco was writing about climate justice in terms of monetary policy. So, it really seeped into every pore of government and all the people that work there. And the problem we have is a lot of the people who are behind this whole of government approach are still on the job. And so Trump has come in, and we've got some good administrators, notably Chris Wright at the Energy Department, Doug Berger in Interior, and they're doing an awful lot to turn this around in a sane fashion. But they've got an awful lot of people working for them that are just waiting for the next administration, which they think will be on their side.
And then, related to this, and I wonder if maybe you can shed some light on it, because you may be in a position with all your contacts and knowledge in the business sector of what's going on here. Brendan Carr, right, comes out and wants the FCC to agree to this sort of media takeover, right? All these media groups can join together as one force. And this is something that Ronald Reagan even opposed. Do you know what's going on there? Because it seems like if that were to take place, then a global initiative like this Declaration on Information Integrity could really get its claws spread in America.
I'm not familiar with the details of that, but I think he's attempting to get the media to do something that we would agree with. But if you create a structure where they're all working together with one to carve out one message, that gun can be turned right around and pointed at your own forehead.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we saw this with the social media. You mentioned a few minutes ago about COVID, right? The clampdowns on free speech that we saw. So even if we have, say, a Democrat in the White House and Democrat-controlled Senate and Congress, God help us all, but if we do have that in America, we still have the private sector. Do you think Elon Musk, for example, would go along with this Declaration on Information Integrity?
No. And
I don't
that's
either.
One of the beauty. That's one of the great things about Elon. No, I don't think so. And watching the tech companies integrate with or work with the Trump administration, and Trump has got David Sachs in there as his cyber or AI and crypto czar, who's got great contacts, and a lot of these social media companies are now beginning to figure out if they work with the government that life is going to be better. And I think some attitudes have even changed. I don't want to get too optimistic, because this is what businessmen do. They play up to the existing political power structure, and in fact, sometimes just the opposite is true, which is they're controlling the political power structure. But no, Elon is a force for good. I mean, he's what he's done with Grok or X and all related. He's done more to turn around free speech than any single person I can think of.
In our last couple minutes, I want to talk about what you just mentioned about how businesses play along, because I'm old enough to remember in journalism covering the Paris Climate Treaty, and it never got ratified, right, by the Senate in the United States. But what happened was businesses started to take up and put in place its provisions sort of as a public relations, like pat on the back, so they could campaign on doing the green thing. First off, do you recall that? And second off, do you see that as being a danger with this declaration on climate change?
Well, I think we need to keep in mind that the green industry, the environment, the climate industry has grown to be trillions of dollars of industries, and there are lots of businesses that are benefiting from all the mandates from government. And I think the Inflation Reduction Act was basically the Green New Deal, and billions and billions of subsidies have gone out, and a lot of those are still in place. And so we've got a private sector now, which used to be opposed to these kind of initiatives. They're now in bed with the climate industry. And if you look at one of the clever things they did with the Inflation Reduction Act, is they made sure that money got spread around to red states, and they're building a constituency where people are dependent on federal grants and so on and so forth. And they're not interested in seeing those climate subsidies go away. It's a little bit like ethanol, and so it's pernicious, and we need to stay in power long enough to reverse this. And it's a yeoman's task.
And just last question, Bill, because listening to you speak, all I could think of is con job, right? Exactly what Donald Trump calls the whole climate change movement. Is there anything that we can look at regarding climate change that isn't part of the con? I mean, is there anything genuine that Americans can sort of latch onto as good environmentalism?
Well, I've separated it into two pieces. There's the climate, there's the global warming piece of it, and then there's the environment and species part of it. And one of the great ironies or perversities of the climate movement is, if you look at what windmills do to birds and what solar panels do to deserts, they absolutely wreak havoc on the environment, habitat, and species. And so, in the name of climate change, they're really wiping out what we used to think of as the environmental movement, the green movement. And so they're absolutely opposite each other. So I'd encourage people to think not in terms of we shouldn't care about the climate. We should, but we ought to be most concerned about habitat and species, because that's where this all started. And the other thing, just to be mindful of, there's not been a single technology that's been invented that can move the temperature projections at all. I mean, in the first place, so we're so anyway, I'm an environmentalist, but I'm a habitat and species environmentalist. And I think of these windmills in California. They call them condor Cuisinarts, and they're killing millions of birds.
They are. Yeah, they're leaving dead bodies everywhere. I know.
Everywhere. Yeah, it's real. Yeah.
So maybe follow the money could be part and parcel of that too, right? When we're talking environmentalism, who's making?
Always true.
Yeah, who's profiting most?
Yeah.
Bill Walton, it is so great chatting with you. You're such a powerhouse of information, and I want to thank you so much for bringing this Declaration on Information Integrity on Climate Change, a free speech nightmare, to bold and blunt listeners' eyes, I guess, to their awareness. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you so much, Bill.
Great talking with you. Good subject. People ought to know. Dig into this, everybody, because this matters.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay blunt.